Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a moment in military history that, honestly, it reads more like a Cold War spy thriller than, a standard naval
Oh,
conflict.
absolutely. The cat and mouse game between India and Pakistan in the lead up to the 1971 war, it's quite something.
Yeah, this deep dive, it really focuses intensely on the high-stakes naval chess that was played in the shadows months before any official declaration of war.
And what's truly fascinating when you look at the sources is how they lay bare the complete picture. Strategic victory wasn't just about traditional firepower. Not at all.
No, it was secured by intelligence, right?
Mm.
Decisive counterintelligence, and maybe most critically, this masterful multi-layered deception campaign.
Exactly. That deception piece is huge.
And for you, our listener, the mission today really is to get a fast, but thorough understanding of these really complex interwoven strategies.
Mhm.
We're tracking India's efforts to neutralize Pakistan's single most potent naval threat, the submarine PNS Ghazi.
While at the same time, they had to protect their own flagship,
Yeah.
the aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, a massive undertaking.
The initial tension in this story is just, it's astounding when you think about it.
It really is. We're talking about how a nation facing this massive humanitarian catastrophe right on its border
Yeah, millions of refugees.
managed to orchestrate a full-scale covert blockade and then execute a deception plan so sophisticated it basically lured their enemy's deadliest weapon into a carefully constructed trap.
It's incredible. And the sequence of events, it fundamentally defined the outcome of the 1971 war, didn't it?
It absolutely reshaped the map of South Asia, no question.
Okay, so to really set the stage properly, we can't just jump into the ships and submarines. We have to start with the politics and the people.
That's right. The crisis that really precipitated the war started in what was then East Pakistan, modern-day Bangladesh.
And it was rooted in some deep systemic issues, wasn't it? Political, cultural discrimination.
That's the foundation. Yeah. West Pakistan, where the central government was based, imposed these severe cultural and political restrictions on the Bengalis in the east. Language was a huge one, representation too.
And this had been simmering for a long time.
Oh, for years. But it just exploded into violent conflict when the Pakistan military initiated its massive, frankly brutal crackdown on March 25, 1971. The goal was just to suppress all political opposition. Completely.
And the immediate result of that violence, a human migration on a scale that's hard to even comprehend.
Yeah, the sources, they document the sheer staggering scale of the refugee crisis. People started pouring across the border into India at just a terrifying rate.
How many are we talking about initially?
The initial rate was over 50,000 refugees daily.
Wow.
Within just a few short months, the number of displaced people living in makeshift camps in India surpassed 9 million. 9 million people.
It's unimaginable. And that wasn't just a humanitarian nightmare, was it? It became an existential threat to India itself, economically, demographically.
Absolutely. I mean, let's pause on those economic figures for a second, because they really tell the story of the impossible strain this put on the Indian government.
What was the estimated cost?
The financial burden just to feed, house, and provide basic care for this influx reached an estimated $700 million.
In 1971 currency, that's enormous.
It's a staggering sum. It represented something like 4% of the central government's entire annual budget back then. And you had this massive displacement happening along thousands of miles of border.
So Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and her cabinet, they realized pretty quickly that India just couldn't sustain this, right?
Yeah.
Economically, socially, it wasn't viable long term.
Exactly. The pressure quickly shifted. It went from being a purely diplomatic issue as humanitarian crisis to becoming a military necessity. Something had to be done.
Which brings us to that crucial strategic meeting in April 1971. Indira Gandhi calls in the three chiefs of the Indian military, Army, Navy, Air Force, and basically says, we need to act.
But they pushed back. The chiefs, especially the Army Chief General Manekshaw, they surprised everyone by refusing to move immediately.
Why? What was the reasoning?
Well, that refusal, it turned out to be a masterclass in strategic timing. They didn't want to fight under unfavorable conditions. Specifically, they wanted to avoid the monsoon season.
Right. Fighting in the monsoons would be a logistical nightmare.
And crucially, they wanted to wait until the Himalayan passes were snowed in. That would limit the possibility of China getting involved, potentially opening another front.
Smart. So they needed time.
They insisted on waiting until December 1971. This gave them time to prepare thoroughly, minimize their own losses, and ensure what they called a decisive, sure-shot victory.
Okay, so that 6 or 7 month window from roughly April to December, that becomes the crucial period for India, the time to weaken and isolate Pakistan before the official war starts.
Precisely. And when you look at the map, the geography really dictates the strategy here.
How so?
To supply their forces fighting in the east, Pakistan basically had only two main routes from the west, air and sea.
Okay.
The first step was pretty direct. India closed its airspace to Pakistani flights on April 1st, 1971. That was a clear, overt move. No ambiguity there.
But the sea route, that was the real challenge, wasn't it? That's where all the heavy stuff was going, military supplies, ammunition, reinforcements.
Exactly. And directly stopping those ships, boarding them, sinking them, that would be an undeniable act of war. And India wanted to avoid triggering that official war for as long as possible to keep the strategic initiative.
So Admiral S.M. Nanda, the head of the Indian Navy at the time, he understood that cutting the sea lifeline was absolutely critical. It was key to isolating East Pakistan, prepping the ground for the planned December offensive.
But the solution couldn't be overt. It had to be covert, it had to be deniable, and ideally devastating.
And this is where Operation X comes in.
This is the genesis of Operation X.
Operation X. It sounds incredibly dramatic, even the name. Can you take us inside how this secret months-long operation actually worked?
Yeah, it was textbook naval guerrilla warfare, really. A secret training camp, codenamed CTP, was set up in May 1971. And the location itself is interesting plastery. West Bengal, a place already steeped in Indian military history.
And who was running this? Not the top brass, I imagine.
No, that's key. It was run by younger officers, Lieutenant Kapil and Lieutenant Das. And they weren't training regular soldiers. They were training specialized local fighters. The Mukti Bahini commandos, Bengalis fighting for liberation.
And what kind of training are we talking about? Not standard infantry stuff, I guess.
No, not at all. Their training was laser-focused on highly specialized, deniable sabotage. These recruits learned how to handle small boats, navigate really dense coastal areas and rivers, especially at night.
Stealth was key.
Absolutely. And most critically, they learned the precise method for attaching magnetic limpet mines to the hulls of ships.
Ah, the limpet mine. So the idea was...
The strategy was surgical. These commandos would swim underwater, usually in the dead of night, find anchored Pakistani supply ships, slap these mines onto the hull below the waterline, set a timer or a remote detonator, and slip away unseen.
And the beauty of that, as the source material points out, is the deniability, isn't it?
Exactly. If an Indian warship sinks a Pakistani vessel, it's a clear act of war, international incident. But if a ship blows up mysteriously in port, and it looks like the work of local guerrillas even if they were trained and equipped by India, well, Pakistan is forced to deal with what looks like a domestic insurgency.
It buys India crucial time and avoids immediate escalation.
It bought them time and it sowed confusion, but the whole thing depended entirely on coordination and secrecy. Even the signal to launch the main attacks was incredibly simple but effective.
What was it?
2 pre-decided songs played back-to-back on All India radio. That was it. No traceable signal, no written orders that could be intercepted. Just listen for the songs.
That's brilliant. And the songs played as scheduled.
They did. On the night of August 15th, 1971, that was the trigger. Commandos launched their missions simultaneously from key ports like Chittagong, Mongla, and Chandpur.
And the impact. What happened when these mines started going off?
The impact was immediate and devastatingly synchronized. You had back-to-back explosions rocking these eastern ports. The results were catastrophic for Pakistan's logistics.
Any specific examples?
Yeah, on August 16th alone, the day after the signal, 2 major supply ships went down. The MV Elabas and the MV Hormuz. Together, they were carrying nearly 19,000 tons of desperately needed arms and ammunition. Destroyed. Gone.
19,000 tons. That's a massive blow.
And it didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks and months, these sustained attacks continued. The estimates suggest over 100 vessels were destroyed or damaged in some way. Pakistan was utterly paralyzed on the eastern sea routes.
They must have been completely shocked, confused.
Totally confused. They couldn't figure out the source. Was it highly trained foreign naval divers slipping in? Or was it somehow their own disgruntled Bengali port workers turning against them? The uncertainty was crippling.
And that confusion was the point, wasn't it?
It was exactly the point.
Ah.
The systematic destruction wrecked their morale, crippled their supply capacity. They actually became terrified to use the sea lanes freely, which created this de facto naval blockade that India didn't officially have to enforce with its own warships yet.
So this covert success, Operation X, it starts to elevate the crisis onto the global stage, right? It forces the major powers, especially the U.S., to sit up and take notice.
It absolutely did. Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, remember, the U.S. was closely aligned with Pakistan at this time. Nixon and Kissinger had their reasons.
Right.
But the consistency and, frankly, the professionalism of Operation X shattered any illusion that this was just some minor local disturbance. Easily contained. It was clearly coordinated.
Did U.S. intelligence figure it out?
They did. The CIA's Office of National Estimates, the ONE, produced a secret memorandum. It's documented, number 144, dated September 22, 1971. And it concluded, definitively, that India was actively and covertly supporting, equipping, and directing the Mukti Bahini.
So the cover was blown, at least at the intelligence level.
At the highest levels, yes. And the confirmation by the CIA meant the stakes were raised dramatically. This wasn't just a domestic crackdown anymore. It was now viewed as an internationally backed, coordinated naval and guerrilla campaign aimed at breaking off East Pakistan.
So with the sea supply lines effectively crippled by Operation X, Pakistan had to shift strategies, didn't they? They couldn't just play defense anymore.
Exactly. They needed an overwhelming preemptive counterattack. They had to hit back hard.
Right. So following those devastating losses from Operation X, Pakistan realized they couldn't just focus on trying to contain these local insurgencies anymore. They had to go on the offensive.
How did that manifest? They started shifting their primary naval and air assets, concentrating them near Karachi. And Indian naval headquarters started picking up actionable intelligence, chatter, movements. It all indicated a possible coordinated counterattack was being planned.
The fear being?
The big fear was a Pearl Harbor scenario. A surprise attack aimed at taking out India's main naval bases and docked assets, crippling the fleet before the war even officially began.
And central to any Indian naval strategy, and therefore a prime target for Pakistan, was India's greatest naval asset at the time, the INS Vikrant.
Absolutely. Our sources describe it perfectly, a moving airbase the size of the city. It was an aircraft carrier capable of launching, 25 fighter jets? In 1971, in that theater, it was the ultimate symbol of India's strategic naval reach and power.
A game changer.
A complete game changer. Its strategic value just cannot be overstated. It was the absolute linchpin for any successful operation by the Eastern Fleet. Crucial for gaining air superiority over the Bay of Bengal, blockading ports, everything.
But there was a huge but, wasn't there? The Vikrant wasn't exactly in fighting shape.
That's the critical complication. The Vikrant was docked at Ballard Pier in Mumbai, and technically it was not fit for war.
Which must have created just a firestorm of internal debate within the Indian Navy. What were the specific problems? Why wasn't it ready?
There were two major technical failures, really serious ones. First, the catapult launcher, the thing that slingshots the aircraft off the deck, it was faulty, unreliable.
Which is pretty fundamental for an aircraft carrier.
Extremely. If a jet had too much load, or the catapult just failed mid-launch, you could lose the pilot and the plane straight into the sea. Huge risk.
And the second issue?
The second issue was with the ship's boilers. Critical A1 boiler problems, specifically multiple water drum issues. These were complex, vital components.
And fixing them wasn't easy.
Not at all. Fixing them properly required specialized spare parts, parts that had to be manufactured and shipped all the way from Britain. Naval engineers estimated the whole process would take 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years. So basically, it wasn't going to be fixed before this conflict boiled over.
No chance. So you have this magnificent, irreplaceable weapon just sitting there in harbor. And most of the senior naval staff were arguing, quite logically, we have to protect it, keep it out of the conflict. We can't risk losing it.
It was a massive choice. Prioritize the strategic safety of your biggest asset or risk deploying it for its immediate offensive capability despite the danger.
Exactly. And the final decision really rested with Admiral S.M. Nanda, the Navy chief, and Vice Admiral Hiranandani. They pushed back hard against the prevailing consensus.
How was their argument?
Their argument was essentially, you cannot leave your most powerful weapon sitting on the sidelines in what is clearly going to be a decisive conflict. They insisted on deploying it. They basically asserted they would somehow make it war-ready, despite the known technical risks.
Did they manage some kind of temporary fix?
They essentially jury-rigged the repairs, patched things up as best they could, accepted the risks, and managed to get the political green light for deployment. It was a hugely bold, some might say, reckless decision.
So, against the odds, the Vikrant began its secret journey, moving out of Mumbai down to Kochi for some work, and eventually making its way around the Indian peninsula towards Madras, entering the Bay of Bengal.
And the moment Vikrant arrived on the East Coast, Pakistani naval intelligence, they were gripped by, well, sheer terror is probably the right word.
Why such a strong reaction?
Because they understood the strategic implication immediately. The air route from west to east Pakistan was closed. Operation X had already paralyzed the sea lanes for basic supplies. Now, the Vikrant's presence meant India could impose a total airtight naval blockade.
Game over for East Pakistan, essentially.
Its presence guaranteed the swift isolation and inevitable collapse of Pakistan's military authority over East Pakistan. They knew it.
So Pakistan realized this threat, the Vikrant, had to be neutralized immediately. If you're Pakistan in 1971, what's the one weapon in your arsenal that can credibly hunt and kill an aircraft carrier way out in the Bay of Bengal?
That task falls squarely and solely to the PNS Ghazi. Pakistan had 4 submarines at the time, but the Ghazi was the only one capable of the extreme long-range transit needed to get from Karachi all the way around India to the Bay of Bengal.
And it had a history related to the Vikrant, didn't it?
It did. The Ghazi was actually a U.S.-made submarine, formerly the USS Diablo. Pakistan had specifically leased it back in 1963 precisely to act as a direct counterbalance to the INS Vikrant, which India had acquired just a couple of years earlier in 1961. It was literally acquired to hunt the Vikrant.
A dedicated hunter. But just like the Vikrant it was hunting, the Ghazi wasn't exactly a spring chicken either, right? It had its own issues.
That's right. It was struggling with age and critically technical defects. We know it had significant issues, particularly with its primary armament, its torpedoes.
What was wrong with them?
It carried Mark 14 torpedoes, which were notoriously unreliable. This wasn't just a minor glitch. The U.S. Navy itself had documented major problems with these torpedoes during World War II. They often ran too deep, failing to hit their targets, or sometimes just didn't detonate.
So using them in combat, especially against a target as vital as an aircraft carrier, was a massive gamble.
A huge gamble. And given these technical limitations, our sources confirmed that the Pakistan Navy Command initially refused the mission. They viewed sending the aging Ghazi on this incredibly long and dangerous mission as just too high risk. Suicidal, almost.
And what changed? What was the political pressure that forced the mission through anyway?
Sheer desperation, basically. By September 1971, the situation in East Pakistan was deteriorating so rapidly for them. Political leadership in West Pakistan felt they had no other choice. They overruled the more cautious naval commanders.
They saw sinking the Vikrant as the only way out?
It was viewed as the only potential game changer. The only way to break the impending blockade, restore morale, and maybe salvage the situation in the East. The Ghazi mission became a political necessity, effectively turning it into this high-stakes, almost certainly one-way operation.
Okay, so the mission is forced through. But Pakistan still needs good, solid, real-time intelligence on exactly where the Vikrant is. And this is where we get into some classic cloak and dagger style espionage, isn't it?
Absolutely. The intelligence leak part is fascinatingly detailed in the records we have. It involves a specific Western country's aircraft. The nationality isn't always explicitly named, but you can guess.
What happened?
This aircraft requested an emergency landing at Madras Airport, citing some kind of manufactured technical problem. Under international aviation protocols, India basically had to grant permission.
Okay, so the plane lands, but it wasn't really broken, was it?
Not at all. Under the guise of performing repairs and needing test drives or test flights. It actually conducted reconnaissance flights over the area. It spotted the INS Vikrant, anchored near the port, took detailed photographic records, and logged its precise coordinates.
And that crucial, actionable intelligence, the exact location of the carrier, gets relayed back.
Immediately relayed back to Pakistan's Director of Naval Warfare. That was the final piece they needed. It provided the definitive go-ahead for launching the Ghazi.
The target was confirmed, so the mission launches. When did the Ghazi actually set sail?
On November 14th, 1971, Captain Zafar Muhammad Khan, commanding a crew of 93 sailors, departing Karachi Harbor. They were handed sealed orders, told not to open them until they reached a specific point at sea, and immediately went into complete radio silence.
A ghost operation from the start.
Totally. Their route was carefully planned. They moved at about 20 knots, but maintained a very wide berth about 400 nautical miles from India's western coastline. This was to evade immediate acoustic detection by Indian coastal sonar stations. They headed silently south, then east, toward the vast Indian Ocean.
But the Indian Navy wasn't just sitting back waiting, were they? They were actively trying to track this submarine, even in the deep ocean. How?
They weren't relying solely on luck or acoustic detection, which is hard in open ocean. They were employing highly advanced signal intelligence techniques for the time. specifically using what they termed a smart radio direction finder.
What could that do? Could they read Ghazi's messages?
No, they couldn't break the complex encryption Pakistan was using for its naval communications. But what they could do was pinpoint the geographical source of the transmissions, even short, encrypted ones. And they detected a specific repeating pattern.
What pattern was that?
A slow-moving vessel transmitting very short, highly encrypted HF bursts, high-frequency radio bursts at regular intervals. These signals were directed back towards Pakistan's naval headquarters in Karachi, or sometimes Dhaka.
And what made those signals so definitive? How did they know it was Ghazi?
Two things. First, the frequency being used and the timing pattern of these short bursts matched the known operational communication records of PNS Ghazi. Every major naval asset has a sort of electronic fingerprint.
Okay.
Second, the direction-finding equipment showed the source of the signal was consistently moving from the southeast, tracking steadily towards the Vikrant's last known general location in the Bay of Bengal. The path fit.
So the electronic intelligence pointed strongly towards Ghazi, heading east. Was this corroborated?
It was by two crucial pieces of, let's call it hard ground intelligence, more traditional spying.
What was the first piece? Something about oil.
Yes, that's a fascinating detail. Indian intelligence intercepted a separate wireless encrypted communication. This was a logistical request originating from Chattagram port in East Pakistan. It was a request for a very specific grade of lubricant oil.
And why was that significant?
Because this particular type of lubricant was highly specialized. It was used almost exclusively in minesweepers and, importantly, submarines. It wasn't standard naval lubricant.
Ah, so a request for submarine-specific oil from East Pakistan suggests.
It strongly indicated that a long-range submarine, almost certainly the Ghazi, was expected to need servicing or replenishment in the east, confirming its likely destination and operational area.
Okay, that's one piece. What was the second? This involved India's intelligence agency, RNAW.
Yes, the Research and Analysis Wing. This is where we see textbook human intelligence boots on the ground in enemy territory. RNAW agents, codenamed ROD and Moriarty, utilized a local contact, a known smuggler named Kawasji, to gain access.
Access where?
They successfully infiltrated Karachi port itself. Their mission was simple. Observe and photograph the dockyards, log all naval movements, look for signs of war preparation.
And what did they find that was conclusive?
What provided the final, clinching piece of evidence was their discovery that anti-aircraft batteries were being unexpectedly mounted on various port structures and ships. This wasn't normal peacetime activity. It was a clear, unmistakable indication that Pakistan was rapidly transitioning to a war footing, anticipating potential Indian air attacks on their main naval base.
So putting it all together, the radio direction finding, the lubricant request from Chattagram, and the RNAW confirmation of war prep in Karachi.
Exactly. Commander C.O. Dharam Dev Duda, known as DDD in naval circles, he was one collating this intelligence. He drew the conclusive inference. PNS Ghazi was definitely at sea. Its mission was almost certainly to find and destroy the INS Vikrant, and its successful attack, or even just its launch on this mission, was likely intended to serve as the trigger for Pakistan's imminent, full-scale declaration of war.
So India knew. They knew Ghazi was coming, they knew roughly where it was headed, and they knew time was running out. They probably had weeks, maybe only days, before the final confrontation began.
The clock was ticking. Loudly. Right, so the Ghazi, still maintaining that strict radio silence, it made impressive time, actually. It successfully navigated over 2,200 nautical miles, past Oka on the Gujarat coast, down past Goa, Mangalore.
All undetected.
Apparently so. It reached Trincomalee on the coast of Sri Lanka for a prearranged refueling stop around November 19th. This deep penetration into the Indian Ocean, completely unsupported, was a monumental feat of navigation and endurance for what was, let's face it, an aging submarine.
Absolutely. And Trincomalee, this is where Captain Zafar Muhammad Khan finally gets to open those sealed orders he'd been carrying since Karachi, right?
Exactly. The moment of truth for him and his crew.
And what did the orders actually say? Was it just sink Vikrant?
They confirmed the two-part mission we suspected. Task 1, proceed north to the waters off Madras, now Chennai, and locate and sink the INS Vikrant. That was the primary objective.
And Task 2, the backup plan.
Task 2. If, for whatever reason, sinking the Vikrant near Madras failed if they couldn't find it, or couldn't get a shot, then they were to proceed further north to Visakhapatnam port. And there they were to lay mines along the harbor entrance paths.
Specifically targeting Visakhapatnam.
Yes. And the orders explicitly stated this was intended as revenge for the shipping losses Pakistan had suffered during India's Operation X. So it was punitive as well.
Okay, so Ghazi refuels, gets its final orders. What happens next?
It leaves Sri Lanka around November 20th or 21st, heads north. By November 22nd, maybe the 23rd, the Ghazi is in the target zone, the waters off Madras, actively searching for the aircraft carrier Vikrant. The hunt is officially on.
The pressure on the Indian command, particularly Vice Admiral Krishnan at Eastern Naval Command, must have been just immense at this point. Ghazi is now in their primary operational area. How did they confirm its precise location near Madras?
This is where that localized, almost low-tech intelligence network paid off brilliantly.
The fishermen.
Exactly. The Indian Navy had, quite cleverly, trained thousands of local fishermen all along that eastern coastline. They weren't spies in the traditional sense, but they were trained to be vigilant eyes and ears on the water.
What were they looking for?
Simple, subtle signs of submarine activity. Things a normal person might miss. A fleeting glimpse of a periscope cutting through the water. Unusual oil slicks appearing on the surface where no surface ship had been. Strange wakes or disturbances in the water.
And did they see anything?
They did. Their reports started coming in. These observations, combined with the earlier electronic intelligence data about Ghazi's general track, confirmed the alarming fact for Admiral Krishnan. PNS Ghazi was definitely operating very close to Madras port, right where the Vikrant was supposed to be.
So Krishnan realizes he absolutely cannot risk keeping the Vikrant there any longer. It's too vulnerable.
Correct. He had to move Vikrant. But just moving it to another major port, say Calcutta, or even back towards the Andaman Islands, wouldn't guarantee safety. Ghazi was a hunter. It would simply follow its primary target wherever it went.
So relocation wasn't enough. They needed to not just protect Vikrant, but actively destroy the threat, destroy Ghazi.
Precisely. And this is where Krishnan implements this really clever twofold strategy. First part, securing the carrier itself.
Where did they move Vikrant?
Vikrant was moved, under absolute secrecy, to a completely uninhabited, isolated anchorage near the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, far out in the Bay of Bengal. This location was given a code name, Port X-Ray.
Port X-Ray, why that name?
Well, the name itself was maybe part of the subtle deception. X-ray implies something hidden, something secret, but also something that could potentially be exposed or seen through. And critically, the waters around the Andamans are very clear and deep, much better for anti-submarine warfare than the murkier, shallower coastal waters near Madras or Visakhapatnam. It made Vikrant safer and made hunting subs easier if Ghazi somehow followed.
Okay, so Vikrant is moved to safety in Port X-Ray. That's step one. But the second part of Krishnan's strategy, that was the real genius, wasn't it? Setting the trap.
That was the masterstroke. Krishnan didn't just want Ghazi to leave Madras. He wanted Ghazi to move specifically to Visakhapatnam, Vizag, as it's often called.
Why Visakhapatnam in particular? What was special about Vizag?
Vizag was, and still is, a major Indian naval stronghold. It housed the headquarters of the Eastern Naval Command. It had superior anti-submarine warfare, ASW equipment, and experienced ASW personnel based there. And crucially, the geography worked in India's favor.
How so?
Visakhapatnam has a deep-water harbor, but it's protected by large, man-made breakwaters. This significantly limits the entry and exit points for any vessel, especially a submerged submarine. It essentially created a bottleneck, a natural kill zone. If Ghazi could be lured into those confined waters, there were fewer escape routes.
Okay, the location makes sense, but how on earth do you convince the captain of Pakistan's top submarine, who is currently hunting Vikrant near Madras and operating under absolute radio silence? How do you convince him that his target has suddenly teleported 340 miles up the coast to Visakhapatnam? This requires near-perfect operational security and some serious psychological warfare.
It was a brilliant multi-layered deception. First, Krishnan started broadcasting radio messages from the Madras area, but using only lightly encrypted codes.
Lightly encrypted? Why?
The encryption was just complex enough to make Pakistani signals intelligence think they had intercepted genuine, secret Indian operational messages. But it was also simple enough that their codebreakers could crack it relatively quickly. They wanted Pakistan to read these messages.
And what did these fake, easily breakable messages say?
They contained carefully crafted chatter, suggesting that the aircraft carrier INS Vikrant had departed Madras and had arrived, or was expected shortly, at Visakhapatnam. They even used an internal code name for Visakhapatnam Mike in these messages to add authenticity.
Okay, so Fake radio traffic is step one, but signals can be faked, right? Experienced commanders might be suspicious. How did they convince the really crucial layer, the Pakistani intelligence assets, the spies or informants they presumably had on the ground in Visakhapatnam watching the port? How did they fool them?
This is where the truly famous, almost comical part of the deception comes in, the part that makes this story legendary.
The vegetable bomb.
We call it the vegetable bomb. Krishnan knew, as any naval officer would, that when a massive aircraft carrier, essentially a floating city with thousands of sailors, docks, and port, the logistical requirements are immense, especially for fresh food.
Right, you need tons of supplies immediately. Vegetables, meat, dairy.
Exactly. So Krishnan deliberately arranged for massive, verifiable purchase orders to be placed with local suppliers in Visakhapatnam. Huge orders for fresh vegetables, meats, bread, milk, enough produce to plausibly feed a carrier crew of several thousand men for an extended stay in port.
So the local Pakistani agents or informants, they physically see dozens, maybe hundreds of lorries rolling into the port area, loaded down with fresh produce. They see the port supply depots gearing up for large-scale logistical support.
And they naturally conclude, only one ship requires this level of provisioning. It must be the Vikrant arriving.
It's genius because it plays on verifiable physical reality on the ground. It's not just radio signals.
Precisely. The deception works flawlessly because it wasn't just abstract intelligence. It appealed to local, observable facts. These local informants dutifully relayed this critical but completely false intelligence back to Pakistan's naval headquarters in Karachi. The carrier is here. We see the supplies arriving.
And the effect back at Pakistani HQ.
The results were instantaneous. They now had corroboration. The intercepted radio messages and the ground reports from Visakhapatnam both said Vikrant was there. On November 25, 1971, at precisely 11:07 p.m., Pakistan's naval headquarters, completely convinced by this multi-layered deception, sent the definitive, fateful message to the silent Ghazi.
What did it say?
The message read, "Occupy Zone Victory with full dispatch. Intelligence indicates. Carrier in port." Zone Victory was the code for Visakhapatnam.
Carrier in port. Clear orders based on faulty intel.
Captain Zafar, receiving this clear directive from his HQ, had absolutely no reason to doubt it. He took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. He immediately altered course, setting his submarine on a direct path for Visakhapatnam, about 340 miles away from his current position off Madras.
And to approach a major enemy naval base like Vizag, he had to be even more careful, right?
Absolutely. He had to enter total radio silence, not even the short, encrypted bursts anymore. Complete electronic silence to avoid any possible detection in the heavily monitored waters near the port.
So by November 27th, maybe the 28th, Ghazi reaches the outskirts of Visakhapatnam. It's there, silently searching for an aircraft carrier.
A carrier that was actually hundreds of miles away, safely tucked into Port X-ray near the Andamans.
But here's the flip side. The Ghazi is now a complete ghost. India's brilliant deception had succeeded in luring the enemy to the designated kill zone, but in doing so, they had also completely lost track of it once it went into total radio silence. What was the atmosphere like in Admiral Krishnan's command center during those few days of absolute uncertainty?
The account suggests the tension was absolutely palpable. It reached a breaking point. General Jacob, who was the overall head of the Indian Army's Eastern Command, was apparently gravely concerned, almost frantic.
Why? They lured Ghazi away from Vikrant. Wasn't that good?
Yes, but the Ghazi was now silent and missing. They had no positive confirmation of its location near Visakhapatnam, and the worst-case scenario started playing in their minds.
Which was?
The worst-case scenario wasn't just that Ghazi might realize Vikrant wasn't in Vizag and leave. The real fear was, what if Ghazi was sophisticated enough to realize it had been deliberately deceived? What if it had somehow tracked the real communication lines, figured out the deception, and was now heading towards the real location? What if Ghazi had found Port X-ray?
Oh, wow. If Ghazi managed to find and attack the Vikrant in its secret anchorage.
The entire war effort could collapse before it even began. The psychological blow would be immense. The success of the entire upcoming war literally hinged on finding and neutralizing this one missing silent submarine. The trap had been set, but now the hunter had seemingly vanished into it. Okay, so Ghazi is now prowling the waters just outside Visakhapatnam harbor, still hunting for a phantom Vikrant. Captain Zafar had basically three primary options now, heavily constrained by the port's geography and his mission orders.
What were they?
Option 1, try to enter the inner harbor to search. But that was extremely risky. The charts show the inner harbor was very shallow, only about 15 meters deep in places, far too shallow for a large ocean-going submarine like Ghazi. The risk of running aground, getting beached, was just too high.
Okay, so inner harbor is out. Option 2.
Option 2. Just wait outside the harbor entrance, submerged, hoping the Vikrant would eventually sail out. But how long could he wait? Days, weeks. His fuel and supplies were finite, and Vikrant wasn't coming.
So that leaves option 3.
Option 3. Fulfill the secondary mission objective from his sealed orders. Plant the mines along the narrow, deep-water channel that served as the main entry and exit path for the port.
Given the failure to locate the carrier after several days of searching and the explicit order for revenge, Zafar chose the mine-laying strategy.
He did. He decided to proceed with Task 2. But even in doing this, he set a crucial technical parameter on the mines that reveals he still thought Vikrant was his ultimate target.
How so? What did he do?
He set the mine's detonation countermechanism to 20.
20? What does that mean?
Well, a standard contact or influence mine could be said to detonate on the very first ship of sufficient size that passed over it. But by setting the counter to 20, Zafar was ensuring the mine would ignore the first 19 ships passing nearby. It would only detonate when a vessel with the enormous acoustic and magnetic signature profile matching an aircraft carrier like the Vikrant was detected close enough.
Wow. So even while laying mines as a backup, he was still specifically configuring them to hit the Vikrant, just in case it showed up later or tried to leave port, escorted by smaller ships. He didn't want to waste the mine on a destroyer or a frigate.
Exactly. He was absolutely still targeting the Vikrant, even if he couldn't visually locate it at that moment. But laying these large mines was a laborious, dangerous process for a submarine. Each one took quite a while.
How long?
Estimates suggest between 30 and 50 minutes per mine. They had to maneuver carefully, maintain trim, open external doors, eject the mine, all while submerged near a busy enemy harbor entrance. Very painstaking.
And this painstaking process, ironically, led directly to the fatal error, didn't it, on November 28th?
It did. While the Ghazi crew was in the complex process of setting the second mine in the planned field, the periscope operators spotted an approaching ship silhouetted against the surface.
And they thought.
In the heat of the moment, under immense pressure, they misidentified it. They believed it was the prize they'd been hunting, the INS Vikrant, perhaps entering or leaving the harbor under darkness.
But it wasn't Vikrant.
No, in reality, it was the INS Megar, a much smaller, simple logistics landing ship. It was just arriving completely routinely for some scheduled repairs in Visakhapatnam. They had no idea Ghazi was there.
So Ghazi sees what it thinks is Vikrant approaching the spot where it's trying to lay a mine. What does Zafar do?
He had to react instantly. To avoid a potentially disastrous collision with the oncoming ship before the mine could be properly deployed and armed, Zafar ordered a sudden, sharp emergency dive to the left, trying to get Ghazi clear and deep fast.
But what happens when a 2,400-ton, fairly old submarine performs a violent, high-speed evasive maneuver like that in relatively shallow coastal waters?
And lost hydrodynamic balance.
Yeah.
It couldn't handle the sharp turn and dive at that speed and depth. The massive submarine basically lost control and violently struck the seabed. A catastrophic crash. The sources confirm the impact was severe. Sections of the outer metal hull plating were torn off and actually floated away, later recovered. And critically, the shock of the impact almost certainly compromised the structural integrity of the forward torpedo tubes, possibly dislodging the already unreliable Mark 14 torpedoes within their tubes.
So Ghazi wasn't sunk by enemy action, but by an accident caused by misidentification and a desperate maneuver.
Exactly. It was stuck fast on the seabed at the coordinates 17 degrees 40.8 Uri north, 83 degrees 21 Uri east, immobilized. And only one mine out of the planned field had actually been successfully placed before the crash.
The submarine was now silent. Not just radio silent, but mechanically silent. Dead on the bottom. What was happening back at Pakistan's Naval HQ?
For the next 3 days, November 29th, 30th, December 1st, Pakistan's naval headquarters tried repeatedly to contact Ghazi. They received nothing but silence. By the beginning of December, they had to grimly accept the reality. The Ghazi, their best submarine, their only hope in the east, was lost. East Pakistan was now completely, totally isolated by sea.
And seeing their last major naval strategy fail, what did Pakistan do?
They played their last card. Pakistan officially declared war on India, setting the date for December 3, 1971.
And India knew this was coming.
India was ready. They had intercepted one final secret Pakistani message on December 1st. This message ordered all Pakistani merchant ships and civil aircraft to immediately clear the Bay of Bengal. That was the final confirmation the attack was imminent, likely starting on the 3rd.
Okay, war is declared. India now needs to immediately bring the Vikrant back into the Bay of Bengal, out of its hiding place at Port X-Ray, to establish that crucial naval blockade and support ground operations.
Correct. Time to unleash the flagship.
But there's still that nagging doubt, isn't there? They think Ghazi crashed on the seabed, but they couldn't be 100% certain. What if it was just damaged, lurking nearby, waiting for Vikrant to reappear? They needed one final, decisive action to confirm Ghazi's fate and absolutely guarantee the safety of their flagship.
They needed a decoy, a sacrificial pawn almost, and one that was, frankly, expendable if necessary. This is where the incredible story of the INS Rajput comes in.
The Rajput? What kind of ship was it?
It was an old ship, an aging destroyer, originally commissioned in the Royal Navy during WWII, acquired by India back in 1949. But in 1971, it was already slated for decommissioning soon. It was nearing the end of its service life.
So it was the perfect vehicle for this ultimate deception. Old, but still capable of making noise, looking like a bigger threat on radar, and crucially, mimicking the radioactivity of a much larger vessel like an aircraft carrier.
Exactly. But this wasn't just a clever feint. This mission was designed as a deliberate, potentially fatal sacrifice.
How is the mission presented to the Rajput's captain?
Vice Admiral Krishnan called in Captain Inder Singh, the commander of the Rajput. He laid out the situation bluntly. Krishnan explained that if Ghazi somehow survived and managed to sink the Vikrant as it redeployed, the psychological defeat would be absolutely irreparable. It could crush the morale of the entire Indian Navy and maybe even the nation.
So Rajput's mission was?
Rajput's mission was to sail out from Visakhapatnam, back towards the Madras route where Ghazi was last thought to be hunting. It was to do so with high signal volume, broadcasting fake radio communications, basically announcing loudly that the Vikrant was coming back to dock, trying to draw out any attack Ghazi might still be capable of launching. The threat to Captain Singh and his crew was explicitly stated as immense. It was potentially a one-way trip.
And Captain Singh's response to this incredibly dangerous, possibly suicidal mission, it's become legendary in naval circles.
His response was stark, selfless, and focused entirely on the mission's objective, not his own survival. He reportedly said something to the effect of, "Sir, whether I come back or not is immaterial. INS Rajput will surely come back." Meaning the ship would do its duty, regardless of his personal fate. It speaks volumes about the individual courage underpinning this whole strategic victory.
Incredible. So on December 2nd, the Rajput sails out, broadcasting fake messages, making lots of electronic noise.
Deliberately sending out radio traffic on frequencies they knew Pakistan could easily intercept. Krishnan even made open, unencrypted calls to the Madras Port Authority, demanding berthing space for the Vikrant, which apparently shocked the local port commander, Captain Duckworth, who wasn't fully read into the deception.
So Rajput is out there, basically painting a huge target on itself, patrolling the danger area where Ghazi might be. Did anything happen?
No response. Silence. Meanwhile, more fishermen had found floating debris near Visakhapatnam metal fragments, insulation that was conclusively identified by naval experts as belonging to a submarine, almost certainly the Ghazi.
So Krishnan starts to believe Ghazi really did sink from the seabed impact earlier.
He became reasonably confident enough that he recalled the Rajput back towards Visakhapatnam. The risk seemed to have passed. And then on December 3rd, the war officially began with Pakistani airstrikes in the west.
But the sources suggest the Ghazi, though crippled and stuck on the bottom, maybe wasn't entirely dead yet. It was immobilized right near the entrance to Visakhapatnam harbor.
And as the INS Rajput was returning to port on the night of December 3rd, its course took it directly over, or very near, the exact coordinates where the massive submarine lay trapped on the seabed.
And then?
Then, at approximately 11:40 p.m. that night, the moment of truth finally arrived. The Rajput sonar team detected something. A sharp, distinct, unnatural pressure vibration disturbance very close, off their starboard side.
What could it have been?
The assessment was immediate. It had to be the Ghazi. Perhaps desperately trying to vent ballast tanks, maybe trying to use compressed air, make some noise, or even attempting a final futile maneuver to break free or surface, a sign of activity from the wreck.
And since war had been officially declared just hours earlier,
Captain Inder Singh acted without hesitation. Protocol was clear now. He ordered 2 depth charges to be dropped immediately, set to explode at the estimated depth of the contact.
and the result.
The resulting underwater explosions were tremendous. The historical records show that residents miles away in Visakhapatnam actually felt the shockwaves through the ground, describing it later as feeling like a small earthquake.
What effect did the depth charges have on the already damaged Ghazi?
The 2 powerful back-to-back depth charges sent massive concussion waves through the water. given the previous damage Ghazi had sustained in the crash, especially those compromised, possibly dislodged forward torpedo tubes containing the volatile Mark 14 torpedoes that shockwave almost certainly caused catastrophic secondary explosions within the submarine itself.
The torpedoes likely detonated inside the hull.
That's the widely accepted theory. The depth charges triggered Ghazi's own ordnance. After that massive secondary blast, the area immediately fell silent. This time, for good.
And confirmation came quickly after that.
Very quickly. The very next morning, local fishermen found more definitive proof floating near the area life jackets, clearly marked USS Diablo.
Ghazi's original American name. Undeniable.
And the final, absolute confirmation occurred over the next 2 days, December 4th and 5th. The Indian Navy sent down its diving team, operating from the support vessel INS Akshay. They descended to the seabed at the precise coordinates where Rajput got the sonar contact and dropped the charges. 17 degrees, 40.8 year on, 83 degrees, 21 ROE.
And they found?
They found the wreck, confirmed visually. It was indeed PNS Ghazi, broken and settled on the bottom.
What evidence did they recover from the wreck itself? Did it confirm the sequence of events?
It did, quite remarkably. The divers managed to recover several crucial items from the wreck before currents made further work too dangerous. They found the Ghazi's official logbook, its hydrographic correction book, and most chillingly, a ship's clock that had stopped dead at 12:15 a.m., consistent with the time the depth charges from INS Rajput would have detonated and likely caused the final catastrophic internal explosions.
Anything else?
Yes. They also recovered Pakistan's secret naval communication codes from the submarine. This provided undeniable proof of Ghazi's intended mission and capabilities had it succeeded. The divers also reported seeing bodies inside the wreck, confirming the loss of the entire crew.
So the sinking of PNS Ghazi, whether initially by accident and then finished off by Rajput, it effectively removed Pakistan's only credible long-range naval threat in the Bay of Bengal.
Completely. It secured the entire eastern seaboard for India. The INS Vikrant was then deployed aggressively, without fear of submarine attack. The naval blockade was fully enforced, cutting off all supplies and escape routes for the Pakistani forces in the east.
And that naval dominance directly contributed to the outcome on land.
Absolutely. The combination of air superiority, partly from Vikrant's planes, and the total sea blockade led directly to the rapid collapse of the Pakistani military position in East Pakistan. This culminated in the largest surrender of military personnel since World War II. Some 93,000 Pakistani soldiers laid down their arms. This led directly to the birth of the new nation of Bangladesh. You could argue the war was effectively won at sea, through intelligence and deception, months before the final shots were fired on land.
Wow. So this deep dive, it's really pulled back the curtain on this hidden underwater war that was so crucial to the 1971 outcome. For you, our listener, I think the key takeaways really illustrate just how decisive and how unconventional naval strategy can actually be.
Yeah.
We've seen the success of these really sophisticated covert operations like Operation X, which totally crippled Pakistan's logistics from the start.
Without firing an official shot in it.
Exactly. And then the sheer power of deception. That vegetable bomb anecdote is just incredible, using something so simple to lure Pakistan's best submarine into a perfectly calculated kill zone.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is how the whole narrative shifts. It's not just about large-scale military movements, fleet formations. It boils down to these precise moments of intelligence gathering, psychological warfare, and counter moves.
It really does.
And the 1971 conflict, particularly this naval aspect, it demonstrates a core truth, I feel. Technological superiority, which, the Ghazis arguably represented for Pakistan in the submarine realm, it can be utterly defeated.
Ow.
By effective counterintelligence, by surprisingly simple deception, and by just sheer tactical foresight. India basically used Pakistan's own desperation, their need to hit the Vikrant, against them. They turned Pakistan's main strength into its fatal weakness.
But as we close out, we have to acknowledge something else too, don't we? All this complex, high-level strategy, the brilliant deception plans. Ultimately, it all relied on individual, often incredibly selfless, actions that risked absolutely everything.
That's a crucial point. The success of the political aims and the naval command's strategy was ultimately validated, made real, by the personal courage of the men on the front line, like those Mufti Bahini commandos swimming with mines, or the RNAW agents in Karachi.
Or Captain Inder Singh.
Especially Captain Inder Singh. I mean, consider the extraordinary psychological burden on him. And then his final, completely selfless decision commanding the INS Rajput. He sailed out fully knowing his mission was almost certainly a suicide run.
Just to protect the national morale, protect the flagship weapon.
Solely for that purpose.
Yeah.
So the final thought maybe for you, the listener, to mull over is this. How much does the success of even the most sophisticated, high-level strategic deception ultimately rely on that raw personal courage, that willingness of individuals to face down almost certain destruction for the greater goal?
Yeah. That's the real sacrifice, isn't it? The human element that underpinned the entire strategic victory in 1971. Something to definitely think about.